Welcome. This is our 6th episode of the first season of Community Corner, where United Way connects with local partners, agencies, and people who live right here to showcase the power of community. During this series of shows, you will also hear from inspiring individuals who have had to overcome incredible barriers and from those who are driving positive change for others. Everything about this show is local, and we call that local love. In June, United Way Halton Hamilton released its annual impact report, where it highlighted the accomplishments and progress achieved by what is referred to as the network of support. These are agencies that offer multiple programs which are funded by donations made to United Way. The report also featured several key ongoing initiatives focused on reducing poverty. This includes participation in community roundtables aimed at poverty reduction, work on menstrual equity through period promise initiatives, and partnerships with investments in 211 Ontario. Some of you may be wondering, what is 211? Dialing 211 simply simplifies the process of navigating health and social service networks by guiding callers to information they need. The service is available 24/7 in 150 different languages. To speak with us about accessing 211, today we are joined by Karen Milligan, Executive Director of 211 Ontario, as well as Renee Wetzelaar, the Executive Director of St. Matthew's House. Welcome to both of you. So great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you, Brenda.
So Karen, there has been quite a rise in demand for the 211 service, and I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about what you're seeing.
Absolutely. So definitely early in the pandemic, we saw a dramatic increase in our call volume. Actually, volume nearly doubled overnight. And our staff did not miss a beat. They went to a work from home environment where they were answering calls at all times of the day, as you mentioned. And we quickly brought in new frontline staff to be able to answer that increased demand. So other than a brief period where call wait times were a little bit longer than normal, we were able to catch up pretty quickly. I think what we're seeing now is that the levels of calls have dropped again to more pre-pandemic levels. But the complexity of those calls and in particular the unmet needs is where we're seeing still some pretty challenging situations. So, our staff have heard countless stories from people who were impacted by the pandemic, especially those in marginalized communities. But even those who had never found themselves in need of help before were immediately vulnerable when the world shut down. People lost their jobs. People had to stay home and care for loved ones and weren't getting paid sick time. Parents trying to juggle their responsibilities of work and homeschooling during a pandemic. And seniors who relied on community programs to meet their basic needs were even more isolated than before the pandemic. So really those were the most frequent calls that we were getting. Requests for food, affordable housing options, income supports throughout the pandemic when new programs were released, new benefits. We certainly saw a huge increase in those calls. And then of course, calls related to health information, people wanting to know about vaccine clinics. How do I get there? Should I take the vaccine? And so, a lot of our calls were redirected to local public health or telehealth to answer those health specific. But in some cases, we were able to register them for some of those vaccination clinics or transportation programs. I think those were the most common issues that we saw during the pandemic, both in Ontario at large, as well as specifically in Halton and Hamilton areas. What we're now seeing is that the mental health impact of a very long response to a pandemic has been severe. And so more people than ever are looking for mental health supports, either for themselves or for a loved one. And the wait lists are longer than ever. Affordable housing is also very limited in most communities, and of course food bank usage is increasing with the rate of inflation. So all of those things combined, as we've witnessed throughout the pandemic, people living in poverty face additional barriers to accessing those programs and services, especially in this digital world that we live in. Mm-hmm. And their well-being is negatively impacted as a result.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you mention mental health supports. Mm-hmm. Mental illness is really a shadow pandemic.
Yes, it sure is.
Stemming from the global health pandemic, and then that's compounded today with the economic crises. Mm. And so we're going to probably expecting to see greater demand on all of our programs. Renee, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground and a little bit about your programming.
Sure, thanks, Brenda. And I so appreciative of the work that 211 does, and we have certainly connected through the pandemic, and probably a lot of our clients making those calls. So, but certainly, on top of the pandemic, and you alluded to it, there are other pressing issues that, quite frankly, were compounded, never went away, and now we're facing backlogs, right? And you said it too, we have many older adults who had never accessed a program before, and they're calling for food, or their housing pressures are increasing, and so we're seeing a lot of change there. So how we have dealt with things over the last while, certainly as the pandemic hit, a lot of our programming and services became mobile for older adults. But we were able to start an emergency food delivery program immediately because we were already sending food home with a lot of seniors with our congregate dining programs. So we had a bit of a network there, but we built on that, and we started also delivering food into City Housing Hamilton buildings where there are many seniors who are isolated. We had a wonderful relationship out of that because you can't always access a tall building, right, when you're trying to reach someone who lives in that kind of housing. But with City Housing Hamilton, we were able to access a lot of extra folks who never had that kind of contact before. We have a mobile food market now, so we can deliver fresh food.
Amazing.
And we're working with Food for Life, right, which is a great partner in Halton and in Hamilton. They've been fantastic. But sadly, on the housing side, alongside the food security issues that we see, there is a lack of affordable housing. People are being rent-evicted, and there is a great pressure on mental health and around your housing situation. And as I was speaking earlier, we currently have 8 seniors on our wait list who are experiencing hoarding issues, and they're being evicted, right? Their landlord has said, I've had enough, I can't do this anymore. And so they really need the mental health support and the physical support to be able to overcome this literal and figurative mountain, right? So we have effectively saved some seniors from eviction. It costs a lot of money to do that work, of course, and without the United Way and the supports that we get from our root funding program, which of course is the longer term funding, which helps, we can kind of dig into these issues a little bit more and not just simply hand over a can or a bag of food or whatever and say good luck. We are actually now able to follow up and dig in deeper and address the food, the housing, and the income insecurity issues that they are facing, right? And it's compounded. And I'll just briefly mention too, as well, is that we've recently taken on the street outreach team that works in the city of Hamilton. So these are folks who are working in encampments, working with people who are living rough. And we're seeing, of course, a tremendous amount of pressure both from within the system, right? Bylaw officers trying to move people around, but then also more and more people who don't want to live in shelter, they don't find it safe, or they're having difficulty living in that environment, so they are choosing to live outside. And so we're in there with our food security programs. We're able to bring people food and water and help with health assessments and such to try and prevent more people from dying, quite frankly, which is what we see a lot of. And it's very, very tough.
It's interesting to hear you mention all of the different solutions and programs, because often individuals are facing multiple challenges.
Yes.
And that's why this network of supports and all of the multiple programs and agencies working together is so important. Karen, so we've been a long-standing partner, right? So United Way and 211, our relationship goes way back to the founding years, and United Way has invested in this initiative for a long time, and actually helped to co-found it at one point in time. I'm wondering if you can share a story about what you're seeing, or give an example of an individual who's accessed some help.
Actually, and it's interesting because, as I mentioned before, we heard countless stories from people similar to the ones that you've shared. I think what we saw was that there were certainly the isolated seniors that we heard from who were struggling to get by and struggling, quite frankly, to feed themselves. So one particular example was a senior from Hamilton that called on a Friday night and shared that she had no food to last through the weekend. Her old age security had been interrupted because she missed a form, submitting a form. And so she'd been without income.
This, right?
Yeah,
the paperwork, the system,
for
it's
sure.
difficult.
Yeah. So she had been without income for several months. The error was corrected, but it was taking some time for her to catch up with the payments. So in the meantime, she was down to her last bowl of cereal, and she disclosed to our navigator that she was thinking that she might have to resort to eating the cat's food. So she uses a scooter, doesn't know the area that well, didn't know how to access or wouldn't be able to access a food bank. So some calls were made by our 211 navigator to agencies who offered food and outreach, and one agreed that they could help. It was out of a church program. So a follow-up call was made the next Monday, and the woman disclosed that she had been visited by volunteers on Saturday, and they brought her enough food for the week and included a case of food for her cat. So she was really getting scared. She disclosed that she was really worried when she called, and it took a lot for her to reach out, but she was quite overwhelmed by the response and incredibly grateful for us being able to connect her with that program. And the great news is that she said that she would be joining that church once the pandemic was over. So she got a referral for food, but she also got connected to her community, which was wonderful. One other quick story that I can share, and again, this is about a homeless couple in Hamilton who had been without housing for some time. They were both experiencing mental health issues and had prior experience with shelters where they had been banned. So they were reluctant to go to separate shelters, and our 211 navigator made a call to the local shelter, but they were the family shelter, that is, and they were full. So they advocated with the shelter worker, excuse me, and connected with the assertive outreach team through Hamilton Public Health. And the couple accepted the offer to follow up with them later that day. So after a few more calls, what they found out was that the couple learned the shelter was working on getting them into the motel program. So all to say, they were very grateful, again, for the assistance that our folks were able to provide.
And that really speaks to a system working together, right?
Absolutely.
I have to say, I'm not unfamiliar with these stories, and it really does take a lot of people making those points, making those connections to provide that assistance. So you guys are a great point of contact to help with all of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, the real value of 211 in my mind is that we're a connector, because we don't offer direct services. So we need to be aware of the programs and services that are out there, but our job is just to make sure people get those connections. It's
uplifting, but it also reinforces the need and the connectedness and the importance of being connected to one another. Renee, we take great pride in funding your programs. I'm wondering if you could share a story or an example of someone accessing some of your programs.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I can't say enough about the work of the United Way. St. Matthew's House has really benefited from our partnership, particularly over the last number of years. So yes, one of the impactful stories that came forward actually kind of links to some of the work that you talked about, which is with our street outreach team. And there was one person who had been living rough for about 7 years. And when we say living rough, basically living outside in the escarpment area, moving from time to time. He was an older person, an older gentleman, and he also had a prosthetic leg. So he was literally, living this way with this huge mobility issue. However, refusing offers for shelter or housing. And so 5 years is a long time to stay connected. However, our outreach team managed to keep that relationship going, right? And building that relationship over time, building the trust, going back again and again, and being patient, right? And allowing for the barriers to fall. And over time, they were able to start bringing him food, because we have now this kind of mobile network of food and fresh food. So they were able to start doing that. Well, wouldn't you know it, I heard in May that this person walked into his first housing in 7 years at City Housing Hamilton. And it was because of our relationship, the support that we were able to bring him, the navigation, all of that network. And to us and to me, when I hear that, that's it. That's a win. That's a huge win, right? And if we can keep doing that, again, we're literally saving lives.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage to come forward to ask for help. It takes a lot. And quite often when individuals are facing barriers, there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of trust, and that really needs to be fostered. So incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Karen and Renee, thank you so much for being here today and dialoguing with us. Your work is really incredible, and the stories that you share really reinforces the need in community, but also how community comes together and solutions for individuals when they need help.
Thank you, Brenda, and we really appreciate being here and couldn't do what we do without United Way's support.
Oh, St. Matthew's House, we really rely on your support, so therefore we rely on the donations, obviously, but it is a great partnership because it's not just about the funding, it is a real dialogue and a way of building community together, so thank you.
And this work is done on behalf of donors, so donors provide the funds, and on behalf of those individuals and organizations, we make these impact investments, so thank you. We're now going to move into our news segment, and we're going to move to one of our team members at United Way, who's going to share a little bit of information about food insecurity and how that issue is impacting us locally.
It's Melise here with United Way. What you're seeing behind me is a local beach where people come to enjoy a break from the heat and often bring with them a packed picnic lunch and tasty treats. Yet, as much as we can sense the joy that takes place here, accessing food is a significant barrier locally, right here in Halton and Hamilton. We've seen the price of food skyrocket compared to a few years ago. People living here have been paying for essential items at a rate of more than 8.1% higher compared to last year, according to Stats Canada. Currently, across Hamilton and Halton, there are people being squeezed beyond their means. This is exasperating in those households that were previously vulnerable, and in particular, food insecure. That means that people are constantly having to make impossible decisions, such as choosing whether to put food on the table or to pay the rent. Food insecurity, not knowing when you're going to eat your next full meal, impacts many aspects of a person's life, making it difficult to get ahead and realize a future full of possibility. Food can be a game changer. When you do not have access to healthy food or have not eaten in 2 days, just so there's enough food for your children, it becomes difficult to move forward. People in poverty are at a greater risk of suffering from depression, mental illness, and isolation, and as a result, struggle to find and keep work, to navigate needed services, and to be a source of support for their families. People are food insecure, not because of a lack of food, but rather because of a lack of money to purchase food. Another barrier is a lack of transportation, preventing access to local programs. It is integral that the community tackles the root cause of poverty, all while supporting those in urgent need. That is why United Way, with donors and community partners, strategically invests in multiple programs that help over 56,000 individuals who are living food insecure. Thanks to community partners and this incredible community we call home, we are able to help individuals who are living food insecure to access food programs and thus changing lives. Thanks so much for joining me here at this local beach. As part of our Community Corner local focus, we'd like to introduce you to this episode's local guest performance. Enjoy, and be sure to watch other episodes for more great local performers.
Humming past cherry blossom trees in early afternoon, running through ocean water, stealing looks under the moon, holding hands, singing La La Land under street lamp lights. Hold my breath, trying not to forget these times. I'm floating high in the banks in May. You got this fire flame too strong to tame. I want your Sundays through to Saturday. I watch my heart as it gets carried away. Ocean breeze floats up to meet me on Second Ave. Let the salt settle on my tongue, I can't help but laugh. It's been a year, blood, sweat and tears brought me to you. But our scarred knees sure as hell couldn't keep us from seeing this through. I'm floating higher in the banks and day. You got this fire flame too strong to tame. I want your Sundays through to Saturday. I watch my heart as it gets carried away. Am I dreaming? 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 'Cause it's hard to believe that we just met. But I'm all in. I'm floating higher in the banks in May. You got me smitten, can't concentrate. I want your Sundays through to Saturday. I watch my heart as it gets carried away. I know I see it in your ocean eyes. Don't leave me hanging on a compromise. I want your falls and your summer times. My heart gets carried away across the line.
Welcome back. We hope that you enjoyed that performance. And as we wrap up, just wanted to really reinforce the importance of staying connected with one another and having a shared commitment to helping one another in this community. There are over 200,000 individuals who relied on United Way funded programs this past year, and today we heard from two of the agencies who run those programs. There are 150 programs supported by donations to United Way. And so thank you for joining us on Community Corner. We hope that you tune in again for our next episode.